Hello, and thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. My name is Kara, and I'm a holistic health practitioner for both people and pets. After working for years in the conventional medicine field, I realized that while our lifespans may be getting longer, our health spans are rapidly shrinking. And when it comes to our pets, both their length and quality of life are decreasing. When I turned to functional medicine and a more holistic approach to health, I saw dramatic improvements for my pets, myself, and my patients. Join me each week as I merge natural health for people and pets by focusing on the root cause of disease and applying raw, real remedies that you can use to improve overall wellness for every member of your family, including the furry ones. Welcome back. This week, my guest is Stephen Calsbeek of Farm Hounds. Stephen has been in the pet industry since 2004 as co-owner and operator of a boarding and daycare facility. Even then, they realized the power of fresh food and offered healthy foods and treats to their clients. Eventually moving into the retail space, the whole dog market was born and still exists in several locations today in Georgia. In 2015, Stephen was approached by a farmer from White Oak Pastures who was looking to partner with someone who would be able to help create products out of the whole animal, which would help minimize waste in the industry and honor their sacrifice by providing as much nutrition as possible. With a commitment to transparency, quality, and nutrition, they create excellent products that customers can be confident in because they know the source and the farmers behind it. Stephen has 2 dogs named Leon and Sam and 2 cats named Otto and Maeve, who are probably the luckiest pets on the planet with a dad who makes treats and shoes for a living. I am so glad to be able to connect you guys with another small independent retailer who makes excellent products delivered right to your door. So let's get to it. And we are back with Stephen from Farm Hounds. Stephen, thank you so much. Welcome. And I'm very excited that you're here today.
Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to chat with you.
I think we're on the same page. We have the same wavelength. We have things that are important to both of us that I think we really connected about. And I think that this is going to be a chat that people can really appreciate. I want to say everybody who listens to my podcast understands that sourcing is really important to me. And I'm always kind of harping on the importance of supporting small companies, family-owned companies, rather than those big corporations that just take over all of the shelving space at your regular, local pet store, right? So to start off, I would love it if you could tell me and tell us why you decided to create this company. Like, what inspired you? How did you get to this space?
Yeah, so it's always funny when you talk about years of how long ago things started and those things, but it was probably about 15 years ago. We were operating in daycare and boarding facility. The language around that was like, hey, this is the whole dog experience. You bring your dog in for daycare, boarding, and grooming. And we slowly ventured into retail and looking at we could cater diets for dogs and those types of things. And so we went from sort of daycare and boarding and the whole dog experience to we ended up actually launching retail stores in the Atlanta region called the Whole Dog Market. And so those stores kind of were like a Whole Foods for dogs. And we started to look at nutrition and really ask questions about transition and rotation and variety and what dogs really need versus want and what people are buying. And so it sort of pushed us into this very, nutrition headstrong, what's good, what's not good. A farm partner who's at White Oak Pastures walked into one of our stores and just said, hey, I'm composting too much. I've got all this product. What can we do with it? And got our brain sort of tumbling about this idea of okay, we could dehydrate products, we could dry them and sell them in our retail stores. And so that kind of kicked off the journey of oh, this farm has excess products. They're an awesome farm. If you're familiar with Bluffton, Georgia, White Oak Pastures is phenomenal. They're worth a Google search if you aren't aware of what they're doing. It's pretty cool stuff, and we can dive into the deeper ends of that. But they had excess product. We started to see if we could take some of that product, talk with them about what dogs like and what sizes were appropriate, and kind of pushed us into going, all right, we've done something for our own retail stores that's we think has legs. Let's scale it and we'll rebrand it as Farm Hounds. And then White Oak was our first farm partner, and then very quickly realized we're going to need more farms because the popularity. And as we started to grow, it's okay, we'll add farms to this process. So that's kind of how it kicked off.
I love how you were already in the pet space, you saw a need, realized that there was room for growth there, and then partnered with somebody who was like, I have waste. I'm practically wasting product. Can you help me so that we are not being wasteful? Which I think that using every part of the animal or as many parts as you can is so incredibly important because we do have so much waste in the meat industry, which fuels a lot of the sometimes controversial discussions about, meat and dietary changes and stuff like that. So I'm so curious. Did you see when you were doing the grooming and the boarding, did you see a difference between animals who were more conventionally fed and animals who were getting like fresher foods in the diet?
Yeah. So, it's funny. We launched a treat company with all of this background of knowing like, hey, we have very firm opinions on like, don't feel loyal to a pet brand, transition and rotate every 3 to 6 months, like get variety of proteins
Mm-hmm.
and change that vitamin pack that's in that food will rotate. And you'll also learn more about your
Mm-hmm.
dog. So like we have people from like a grooming question of like, hey, my dog's itchy scratchy, you know, it could be
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
environmental allergies, but if you're rotating, you're doing chicken this 3 months and the next 3 months you're going to beef, you're going to learn a little bit about your dog just off of that dietary change. So not even looking at like kibble
Yeah.
versus raw, which is a whole, I'm sure you've got podcasts dedicated to that very conversation. It's just even changing up the proteins can show you things. So like my dog on a salmon
Yeah.
diet, less itchy scratchy, more omegas in the food. My dog on beef is going to be gassier because of higher fat content. So there's things that you can
Mm-hmm.
teach yourself just by transitioning and rotating, your diets. And so we got really firm on like looking at like, okay, we're not going to have anything with corn as a filler. We're going to look at brands that are doing things with protein being like 1 and 2, and even 3 if you can get the first 3 to be protein or animal based ingredients and things like that. And we were
Yeah.
sort of, this was 20 years ago where kibble started to make a huge run towards you know putting better ingredients in dog food, and then treats were to follow and those types of things. So ultimately that
Mm-hmm.
was sort of our heartbeat going into this. And so when we started to make treats, it was kind of a no-brainer to say, hey, why would we put a filler in? And any treat that's adding in an additional ingredient is, it's either to develop more profit for that business, or it's
Mm-hmm.
to make it soft and chewy. That's the other conversation you get into when we talk about the textures of what
Mm-hmm.
our product is and what that is. But
Yeah.
with us, it's all single ingredient. It says beef heart. That's all you're going to get is beef heart.
I completely agree with everything you're saying because not to totally slide off topic, but one of the things that does frustrate me about the kind of more conventional pet realm is that you get a lot of conventional veterinarians who tell pet parents pick one food and never change. And that's the absolute worst thing that you can do, even if you are feeding 100% kibble or something shelf stable. Obviously, we talk about it very passionately when it comes to fresh food, saying rotation is important. It's how you get the different nutrients. It's how you kind of balance over time and make sure you're getting all that you need into the diet. But that doesn't stop if you're not feeding fresh food. So I love that you brought that up because I want to make sure that people who are listening who maybe feed 80% kibble, 90% kibble, and then maybe they're just doing fresh food toppers, or maybe the only fresh food that they can do right now is your treats, right? But if you're feeding a shelf stable food, you definitely still want to rotate. And you can visit my website and my Instagram and listen to me harp on and on about leaky gut and what causes leaky gut and allergies and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's always a hot topic and something that's important not to forget.
Yeah. In store, in our
Um,
retail stores, I remember talking to customers that walk in and we use the language of like, you can only have peanut butter and jelly so many times before you're just tired of peanut butter and jelly. And it's like, and you have to put it in like human terms because the way our
yeah,
parents fed the family dog was the same bag of food for that dog's entire life. And so
yeah,
it's like, and then now you're seeing
yep,
pets take more of a family role versus like a pet role.
yeah.
And so you're seeing more and more people flip bags around, look at ingredients, try to ask questions, and it's fun to see the change happening.
Yeah. It's bringing us out of the dark ages for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I feel like we really connected about when I was kind of came upon the Farm Hounds booth when I was at the Naturally Healthy Pets conference was the importance of sourcing. And I mentioned at the beginning, sourcing is really important to me. I'm very passionate about it. I think that it can really kind of make or break a product, right? If you're, Tyson chicken nuggets versus the air chilled, pastured, chicken from the small farm. And it clearly is very important to you guys as well because you have phenomenal farm partners. I mean, you have it splashed all over your website, and you make it very clear that plays a huge role in what you offer. So can you speak a little bit about why sourcing is so integral to your company?
If you can know the source, you can trust the product is one of the slogans we'll put on a lot of things. The first thing from sourcing is like, is it imported? Is it coming from outside the country? So we only use farms that are in the United States. as soon as you touch into spaces that are like imported, tracing becomes really difficult. There's a lot of tricks that they can do to say like, oh, this is from the US, but it was actually imported and things like that. So, keeping that sourcing here in the States allows us to really understand exactly A to B where that product has been. We work directly with our farm partners. That's another level of transparency. So we know exactly where things are coming from. We're the ones working with those farms. Being able to know how it was raised, where it was raised, what did it consume. Each of our farms operates slightly different, but again, it's one of those things. As we go in, we're adding 2 more farm partners this month. We had to go through that process of what that looks like, and asking the questions of understanding kind of the full picture of what is going on at those farms. As we add farms, the funny thing is that farms will tell farms. And so we'll get farms that reach out to us and say, hey, I heard you're, working with White Oak Pastures. Here's what we're doing. And so then the conversation of scale and how much they're actually processing per month and those types of things. But that was one thing that was very true to us, is like, on everything you buy from us, we will tell you the exact farm we work with to make that exact product. It is a high road, and I say that by it's more complicated. It's not like most companies have one ingredient and they can store that one ingredient in one place. Well, if I have chicken feed coming from 3 different farms, I have to store those things as separate items so that we can track that farm all the way through their process. And so there is a logistical sort of system that has to be in play to sort of keep those farms on every single part through the entire process.
I feel like that would be such a huge endeavor. Well, I mean, everything from like vetting them and making sure that they're doing processes that you want, to figuring out how much they can provide for you per month based on like customer need, and then how you're going to store it, and then you have to label it. And I feel like that would blow my mind.
Yeah, it's definitely
so
like
logistics.
If you're a customer of ours, you have to be okay with some things going out of stock at times. That's one thing we talk about is like, we are going to operate based on our farmers' schedule. They're not raising these animals for, the consumption of these treats. They're doing what's best for the animals. So they're not slaughtering animals early. They're letting them live their correct lifespans, and they're doing things that, honor the animal, don't stress the animal. And so because of that, we might not get enough pig ears to get through the month, and so it might go sold out. Sign up for notification when it comes back in. And so when we start to sell out of things, that's when we say, okay, let's find more farms. How can we get more beef ears? How can we get more trachea and those types of things? So as we add customers, we have to add farms, and that's sort of the situation we're in. Quality of ingredient. So if you're feeding organ meats, if you're doing industrial feedlot organ meat, and that's, again, if you don't know where things are coming from, it's hard to tell, but your filter organs are basically filtering out the toxins from that animal's body. If they're in a very stressful environment and they're standing on concrete and they're being fed, horrible diets, you're going to get way more toxins in those organs. And so if you're doing grass-fed, pastured, lifetime, these cows had one bad day in their life, is what Will Harris says at White Oak Pastures. They are living in a field their entire life. Those organs are so much more nutritionally dense and so much cleaner.
100%. And it's something I've seen actually recently things floating around the internet saying like, don't feed liver because you're just feeding toxins. And the truth is, it just like with everything else, it depends on where you're getting it from. Because even something as simple as stress, which how easy is it to get stressed out, right? You can't overstate the importance of being in a natural, calm environment where these animals can practice their, like chickens, for example. Chickens love to perch. Chickens love to peck. They're not going to get that in a feedlot. And if it's something that's simply labeled cage free, well, that doesn't mean very much. Versus a pastured chicken, they can perch on stuff. They can peck at the ground. They have ability to roam and do their normal, natural chicken activities. Same thing with a cow, same thing with a pig. Pigs are actually treated really terribly in America. It's very sad. But yeah, I don't want a detox organ from an animal whose detox pathways are completely overwhelmed and overburdened, because then I probably am not getting the best thing. And we're seeing dogs who have developed copper storage disease and all kinds of stuff. And even like you need your B vitamins for methylation, for liver detox, and those pathways can get easily overburdened if you don't have enough B vitamins. And the crap that they feed these animals, I mean, the GMO corn and soy, and it's all sprayed with glyphosate, and I mean, I could go down this forever and ever. We could have a whole 45 minutes talking just about that, but I agree, and I am so glad that you brought that up, because that's probably my top most important example of why sourcing is important depending on the part of the animal you're choosing to feed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a very, you can chase that, conversation all day long, because it is, but it starts with that farmer and starts with that source, right?
Yeah.
And then how it's handled, through that entire process to where we turn into treats is,
Yeah.
you can still find companies that can take a good product and still mix it with all sorts of stuff your dogs don't need, like salts and sugars and rosemary and things like that.
So you've already spoken. Now, you mentioned White Oak Pasture a few times, which I've been on their website. I want to go there one day, just so that I can see their farm and meet them and walk around. But I would love for you to highlight a couple of your partners and their practices, if you are okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. The thing to touch on White Oak that's really unique is they had a couple companies come out and sort of do some studies on carbon and emissions and what's going on, and they were able to sort of scientifically prove that with regenerative agriculture, you have really healthy grass, and that grass is alive and microorganisms, and that's due to the animals working the pasture. What they were able to show that their fields are sequestering, storing more carbon than their cows are emitting. And so a lot of people talk about animal consumption and bad for the environment. Well, at the regenerative agriculture level, you're seeing some really cool information about just, hey, it's actually good for the planet. It actually reduces emissions. And so it is kind of a unique way of looking at agriculture. So White Oak's got a ton of information on that and how they operate. And same thing for all regenerative agriculture. A couple of really cool stories. Polyface out of Virginia, Joel Salatin, and what they're doing. The pastured poultry space has been really sort of designed by him in a lot of ways. One thing we're able to work with them on is we're able to come in and buy their roosters. And so if you look at any basically chicken-based farms, they want egg-laying hens. They don't want a lot of males. They want females. And so if you look at the industrial level, they take the baby chicks and they separate the males and they throw them into grinders and they just basically dispose of them. And so because there's not a lot of purpose, there's not a lot of value. And so it's a really weird, twisted thing. And so most farms, even if at the regenerative level, they're like, we'll purchase, we need more the female, we need more female versus males. And so we're able to come in and say, hey, you guys could breed on property. We will buy all of your roosters. And now they're able to sort of breed on property, which allows the animals to learn predatory issues a lot faster, and they're also healthier. So there's a lot of really cool benefits, but we're able to sort of step in and say, hey, we'll purchase the roosters. That allows you guys to sort of change what you're doing. And we have a really cool partnership with them in that capacity. But we're able to find ways when we're able to talk to farms and say, hey, capture these ingredients. We will sell them to dogs. When it comes to cow noses and ears and all those types of things and tendons, and we get able to talk with farmers that have been just composting this stuff. It's really cool for them to make more money per animal. They get to hire more workers in the community a lot of times because they're capturing more stuff. So that's another cool thing. And then it honors the animal by holding more. So that's a cool thing for White Oak and Polyface. Joyce Farms, the story from them, they're a co-op in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They had a lot of good sales channels to the cruise line industry. And when COVID hit and that whole thing shut down, they had all of this product. They didn't have anywhere to go with it. And so we're able to step in and say, hey, we can buy that. It was, I think it was pheasant. They had a bunch of pheasant ready to go and didn't have anything to do with it. And so instead of losing that product, we're like, hey, we'll launch a new line. And we did a limited run, and we haven't brought it back since then, but it was one of those things where we were able to sort of step in and support that. And our motivation is our farm partners. That's sort of where we're like, how can we pull more from our farms and do some really cool, fun stuff?
Wow. And I love that you mentioned the regenerative ag as well. I'm just going to throw it back to maybe episode 8. Oh gosh, I don't even remember when I had them on, but I had Melissa and Dakota from Soul Fed Ranch, and they're regenerative ranchers local to me in California, Northern California. And we had an amazing discussion about carbon emissions and regenerative agriculture and transferring how it even changes like the need for like feed, cattle feed, right? And how those monocropped farms could then be slowly transitioned into an area where you could do regen ag as well. And I'm glad to hear that so many places across the country, I think, are starting to pick up on that and talk about that and push for that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hardships, policies that are more geared toward conventional farming that would need to be changed to I think really create an incentive for people to even try, but that's a conversation for another day. Okay, so once you receive the product from the farm, can you walk me through a little bit of how that works? I know that you're dehydrating it. You mentioned that storing it can be in like labeling so that you can trace everything back. I would love to hear how you guys do that because it sounds like a lot of logistics again.
Yeah, it gets crazier. Every farm can send us different combinations of ingredients, right? So, Polyface might send us cages and organs. Cages are just basically after the muscle meat has been removed, they're sort of left over with the
Mm-hmm.
carcasses, and so like that's what they call cages. And so we
Yeah.
do our chicken strips have organ, muscle meat, bone, and blood all ground up into like a nice little dog treat. Well, the ratios can change slightly because each farm sends us sort of different things, and so we've got whole turkeys coming in tomorrow, so from a different farm. And so I think it's coming in from Joyce Farms. And so it's like, then we have to look at what we got, and then we have to go, okay, we'll remove this for the jerky, and then we'll take the cages, and we've got enough organ meat in. And so which organs do we have? We've got gizzards, we've got heart, we've got liver. So there's different things. So like it's always, it is chaotic, but it is one of those fun things where that farm will take what we can get our hands on. And then once we get that
Yeah.
in, those things can get divvied up into different ratios and different things. And so we've tried to find systems that can kind of work for us, but it's because we're so unique. It's always one of those weird things where each farm is sending us sort of different starting points, and then those things have to be sort of assessed and kind of maneuvered. We sell things like beef heart and beef kidney and beef lung. That's one ingredient. That's pretty straightforward. We just need to get that in. We typically get things in frozen. Farms have to capture over the course of a couple of months to capture enough to ship things to us to make it, logistically possible. So a lot of times we talk to smaller farms, and if they're only slaughtering like 3 cows a month, that's something where we'll educate them on sort of what we do with those parts and pieces, and can they find a way to do that for their own local communities and their farmers market and things like that. Once they reach a certain size of a farm, they're all still small family operated farms, but for them to capture a pallet worth of raw materials, that's typically where we try to start as at the minimum, and then find those farms that have more cooperative sort of situations. One of the farms we're partners we're bringing on this month, they're cooperative in Idaho, and they've got a network of 2,000 different farms that are doing things, and so they're a really cool one to bring on. And I won't release the name yet because it's not official, but we'll launch that hopefully here at the end of the month. But it's fun as we find these different communities, and so a lot of these smaller farms are sort of banding together and creating a network, and that's kind of a cool thing to work through, is to say, hey, this is a co-op, and this is what they're doing. But which I've gotten off track from your question, but we get the raw materials. We then have a processing space where we've got about a team of 8 that will take those ingredients, we'll break them down, trim the fat that needs to be trimmed. We will then take that, tray it. We have a machine called the depositor that will actually help us tray certain things if we're going to grind stuff into like actual shapes. It helps us to be able to put stuff in like stick shapes because it's a little bit faster on the traying side. But basically we take raw, we break it down, we dehydrate it for X amount of hours, and then pull it out. We do a water activity test to make sure it's shelf stable. We're a preservative-free company, so as long as it's dry enough to a certain level, it's going to be shelf stable. So keep it in a cool, dry place, and you're sort of good to go. Our products are on the crunchier side, and this is something that we always run into conversation because people want soft and chewy. To get soft and chewy, you have to have some sort of preservative in there because moisture is what allows mold to grow. And so to combat that, there has to be a preservative. And so because we choose to be preservative free, we are going to be on the crunchier side, which dogs typically love. It's typically not a problem. We're not too hard. We're very snappable, very chip-like, but it is going to be on the crunchier side. We do dehydrate up to around 160 degrees. When it comes to sort of nutrition and value, we always talk about, raw being the best. You have to apply some heat to dehydrate. However, it's not like it's baked at like a 200, 300 degrees where you're going to lose a lot more of the nutrition. So we do kind of find in the middle where we're like, hey, we're not a raw product. We're not a baked product. We choose to dehydrate. That was the venture we started with versus like a freeze dried, which I think is a question we'll get to a little bit later. But so that gives you kind of, farm sends to us. We break it down, dehydrate it. We're the ones packaging it. And so we do have a fulfillment team that is taking those products. We're slapping that farm partner on the front of the bag. We're loading that bag and then shipping out to customers across the country. So we've got our hands on the entire process. So there's no middle company that is doing anything. We don't do white labeling. There's no other company that's taking our product and saying it's their own, those kind of things.
I mean, really, you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you about, like, freeze dried versus dehydrating versus air dried. You know, different companies choose different methods. In the end, I think it's just what works best for them. And I would imagine you probably have, there's only so much space, right? You can only have so many dehydrators or so many, freeze dryers. And those machines in and of themselves are expensive. I have a tiny little one that has, I think, like 5 shelves, and I'll use it to dehydrate apple strips or, I'll cut chicken hearts in half and dehydrate those. And even that little thing was like $180 on Amazon. So, I mean, they're pricey.
We started with the residential ones back in the day. We'd have like 12 of them running, and then we got to the one that's the size of like a kind of a Mini Cooper. It's like, we call it the Fiat. It's a smaller one, and then now we've got ones you actually can roll in trucks, and we're sort of doing it as large scale as we can. But it's fun. Air dry is really cool. I think air dry typically goes up to like 120, and so we looked at doing air dry at one point. It does hold more nutrition, but it's really hard to make sure you're killing all the pathogens. We hear from a lot of companies that do air dry that those customers experience a lot of mold issues because the things didn't get dry enough. And, it's one of those trickier things depending on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to scale as a company. Air dry is great, but it definitely adds some complications that we just don't feel are worth it, when we'd rather, again, we're in it to help these farms is kind of our primary goals, to say like, all right, how can we add more farms? How can we move more product? And then, and the dogs get the advantage of that because they're going to get a safe product and they're going to get a clean product. So
absolutely. I have a couple of these next to me. So for people who are listening and not watching, and if you want to watch, you can go over to YouTube, but I have a couple different treats here. So I have the chicken gizzards, which this is actually a favorite of my cats. And I mean, my dogs will eat anything, but my cats are a lot more selective about what they choose to consume and often look at me like I am something you would scrape off the bottom of your shoe if I offer them something that they don't want to eat. So I'm a big fan of the chicken gizzards. And I mean, it says right on here, so you mentioned almost like a rod shape, which is what these are compressed into. So on the shelf, I think if you walked up to it and were expecting chicken gizzards, which are usually like kind of circular and flat, this is made into more of a stick. But you said, it's crunchy, yes, but it's easy to break, which is nice because my cats won't consume a whole one of these at one time. So I'll usually break it in half, and then there you go. I have a treat for 2 different cats. Of course, if I have a dog, they'll consume 5 at once. So, but it's cool because it says right on here, this bag comes from this farm. This one is from Pittman Farms in, I'm going to say it wrong, Sanger, California?
Yep.
Sanger? Yeah, I wonder how far that is from me because I'm in California as well. But I've had these now for, I have to be honest, I don't go through treats quickly for the cats. I've probably had this for more than a month. And I mean, there's no evidence whatsoever of any mold, any growth, nothing smells funny. It all looks the same as when I first got it. It's not, when things get stale and sometimes they don't stay as crunchy. This is not like that at all. And we'll go through this over the course of a couple of months between my 3 cats. And it really is truly shelf stable and sticks around for a long time. And then this little guy here was you gave out some little sample size treats at the Naturally Healthy Pets Conference. So I've been waiting to give these to the dogs until our episode. So I'm going to give it to them probably after we're done. This is some beef liver. But yeah, I like the packaging is nice. It has the cardboard backing instead of being 100% plastic. I like how it says exactly where it comes from. Pittman Farms is one that I think we didn't talk about, and I would love to hear about if you know offhand, like what other stuff you get from them, not just chicken.
If you look at, I think it's called Mary's Chickens was their first starting point, and then they've connected to Pittman to get their product out the door. But we get pretty much chicken and turkey from them. It's kind of the 2 main proteins that come from them. Where all of our beef is coming from, like Thousand Hills, and White Oak, and Joyce. It's tricky. We have about 25, 26 different farm partners that all across the place, that it's just always one of those things we're trying to remember each one. We have a great link on our website that takes you through all the farm partners. It's one of the tricky things too, because some people want to get a product from a specific farm. And so, just because our website might say White Oak on that sticker on that front page, like it rotates all the time. And so it's always hard to get people the exact farm they're trying to hunt down. And it just depends on the season we're in and where that farm is for, sourcing and those kind of things. But, But yeah, it changes. We're looking at printed bags that are fully recyclable. That's our next journey, is sort of to go through some rebranding and look at doing some things that kind of clean things up rather than having to put a front and back label on, to have a printed bag that still does exactly what we want, but also reaches
Yeah.
kind of full recyclable. Even though we do a printed bag, that farm partner oval will be something we always have to manually add because the farms are always changing.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, when I'm looking at treats at the store, I tend to be kind of torn because I do love when things are fully recyclable. Don't get me wrong. I like to put the cardboard and the paper in there and I like to compost it. But I do also really like to be able to see what is in the treat package, because I have been unfortunately surprised before where I thought I was buying something that was either going to be like a strip or more of like a rod shape like this, something that's going to be easy for me to break. And you can tell if you just look at it. And if you're not looking at it and you're just feeling this mystery package, for my dogs, it's not a big deal. But when it comes to my cats, they're just, like I said, they're so picky. And my dogs are garbage disposal. So if I buy it for the cats and they don't want it, the dogs will eat it. But something like this is so perfect because I can see through the front and I can tell, oh, that's something my cats will actually chew on. So it's so hard because I'm torn because I want to see what I'm getting, but I also want to recycle. But it's my own personal problem.
Where you're seeing, more and more people, like just the way it's visible, being able to know exactly what you're getting. Because most of our sales are direct to consumer from our website too. It's like we get some flexibility on like what we show online versus what you're going to get. So we can be more aggressive on our packaging to go more towards that consumer friendly. We're looking at composting too, like compostable bags. Unfortunately, when they mix with like animal oils, they break down faster. And so the technology's not there yet, but it's moving in a direction where people are trying to, it is a marketable thing that companies want to have compostable bags and those types of things. So we're keeping our ear to the ground. So as that advances, we'll be able to sort of include it. I do want to hit back since you brought up cats, because people always ask, farm hounds, are you cat friendly? Cats being obligate carnivores. And for those who don't know what that means, it means that cats are fully capable of surviving on just animal ingredients. They don't need any vegetation whatsoever. And so our products are biologically fully appropriate for cats. Cats, however, can just be picky, and they can just choose to not like something because they feel a certain way. And so, we opted to go the dog route because dogs typically land in the garbage disposal pile when you're sorting them into picky versus not picky. Where cats, I have two cats, we have two dogs, and we have one cat that will eat everything, and I have one cat that will sniff, 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 and then choose one way or the other, depending on if it's Tuesday or Thursday. It doesn't really, but so that's for people asking like, oh, can I buy this for cat treats? We do take care of every customer. If you buy something that does not work out for your dog or cat, we want to know about it so we can make things right. So we do free returns on all orders, and we make sure that we take care of everybody. But that's just to hit on cats. If our cat listeners are confused on farmhouse streets.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I feel like it's easier to come up with catchy dog names than it is catchy cat names, although there's some good ones out there. But what other proteins just in general does Farm Hounds offer, and can people find on your website?
Chicken, duck, and turkey are the common birds. Beef and pork are going to be the other two. We do get some boar from White Oak. We work with North Star Bison to get bison in as well. So we're trying to scale that side as well. That's a little more complicated because when you get to the exotics, it becomes a little bit more price point heavy. And so trying to continue to figure out how to do that at a cost-effective way that doesn't necessarily impact the customer. But if you're a dog customer and you're shopping for exotics, you sort of understand how that scales. We just launched lamb. That's a new one for us. And so you can see that on our website as well.
The lamb, I love that you have the lamb. Bison, not a lot of people have bison. So I'm excited to hear that you can offer that sometimes.
You'll see we've got like bison lung and some bison strips and bison trainers on the website for bag products. We're trying to get our chews back. We get bison ears and bison noses and those types of things, which are always really fun for them to chew on. So it's interesting too. It's like sourcing. People are like, oh, we want you to add a fish line, and we want to do, can you do kangaroo, and can you do super crazy exotics? Like we want to do venison, right? You can't sell domestic venison. You have to import it based on wild game laws and things like that. And so, even though we could get some of those super exotics from outside the country, it just becomes really hard to back up the integrity of that product. And so we choose to stay domestic. And maybe at some point we'll launch a different brand altogether that pulls from New Zealand and some other things that are really cool that are coming out of there. But There's a catfish farm
Yeah.
that's in Tennessee that does some really cool stuff, and it's vertically integrated and really cool, but it's still a farm.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, you know,
Yeah.
can you do wild caught and still know where things come from? And how do we do transparency if we venture into, protein sources that don't necessarily align with kind of why we started? And so again, we always sort of
Right.
go, let's not chase ghosts. Let's stay true to who we are. Let's do what we know we do,
Yeah.
and kind of lock that in place and just lean into that.
It's really important. I mean, the integrity and the values of the company are the reason why you have the company, right? And so in the end, if somebody's going to say, oh, well, I'm not going to use Farm Hounds because they don't have fish, well, then there's a lot of other companies that are going to give you the fish that you want, right? So instead, you can come back to Farm Hounds for the bison noses that probably nobody else offers. That's actually something, when you said that, I would love to try. So I'm going to have to go on and sign up for the alert for when it's back in stock, because I have a feeling my super chewer dog would love something like that. I think that, it's fantastic that you have so many different proteins. Some of them are on the novel side, so this is really helpful for people who have dogs that maybe have some food sensitivities, or maybe you're trying to avoid, you're doing like an elimination diet just because you're trying to figure out what our sensitivities are. Having access to treats that are novel can be really helpful, because it's actually one of the biggest challenges that I face with some of my clients is we need to do a really strict elimination diet, figure out what your dog is reacting to. And when you're doing that, it's, all pork for 3 days. Nothing else. No chicken treat, no beef treat, no, turkey treat. Pork on pork on pork. You want a treat? It's got to be pork. So it can be hard sometimes for people who are really going through it to find something that they can give as just a treat, a little snack to show their love to their animal. And so I'm glad that you have such a wide array of proteins. So that's really exciting.
We also hear from customers a lot with allergies that their dog does horrible on like a chicken kibble, but then on a chicken treat that's 100% single ingredient, like the body processes it so differently. And so it's like, just because your dog was allergic to something that was in a kibble, there's so many ingredients in kibble that can trigger things and cause issues. And then, it's like, and so we get a lot of people who are like, oh, I thought my dog was allergic, but he does really great on these different ingredients and these different things because it doesn't trigger in the body the same way a heavily processed ingredient's going to trigger. So, which again, the nutrition side, that's the space we want to start to build our company. Like, again, right now we're big on here's the farm, here's single ingredient. And we know kind of baseline things, but the next space for us is to add more imagery to our website and bring more education.
I love that you said that too, though, because my dog Bear is a prime example of that. So he's a golden retriever, and we all know golden retrievers are very well known for having allergies, right? I say allergies with quotations. And he does, in fact, have some seasonal sensitivities, and sometimes you just can't get away from it. But when he was young, I kept bringing him to the vet. Now, this was far before I did anything holistic. This is when I was still 100% conventional, both in my nursing career and with my pets. And I kept taking him to the vet. I'd be like, he's having explosive diarrhea. What would they do? Give us a prescription for metronidazole, right? And it wasn't until a friend of mine said, well, maybe he's allergic to chicken. A lot of dogs are allergic to chicken. You should try a different kibble. So I went out and I bought, I don't know, like lamb or something. Lamb and rice from Purina. And his symptoms actually did resolve. And so I said, oh gosh, he really must be allergic to chicken. His problem was that the chicken, and I say that lightly because it's not real, it's chicken meal, is so the actual protein, the chemical structure of the chicken protein becomes so denatured from the high heat, repeated baking extrusion process that goes into the kibble, that's what his body was reacting to. Now, we've been 3 years fresh fed, and he can gobble down a raw chicken leg with no problem whatsoever. He eats chicken treats all the time. Chicken feet are a staple in our house. And so a lot of times, if you just get away from that ultra processed version of that animal protein, your dog or cat may do fine. Now, the caveat to that is sometimes the body will still recognize that chicken that you're putting in there and go, oh, red alert, we have a problem with this. So sometimes you need to take a little break, take a step back. Maybe you don't feed chicken for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and then you can reintroduce it in raw, fresh food form and see how they do. And a lot of times, once you've repaired that gut damage and you've gotten away from that offending protein, they can eat it again. And so I always tell my clients when we're doing an elimination diet, this doesn't mean forever. Put it on the do not feed list for now. Let's work on strengthening that gut health, and then we're going to come back around and let's reintroduce it and see how we do. I was very curious about were your sprinkles. Can you explain what these are and tell my listeners about them?
Yeah. So ultimately, we don't like any waste, right? We're trying to use every piece and every product. And so when our baggers are done, with a batch and they're bagging that all up, we're left with sort of crumbs and
Hmm.
leftover pieces.
Hmm.
Some of that we turn into samples, like one of the samples you got was one of the smaller pieces, but then we're still left with crumbs. And so we took that, we grind it up into a finer powder, and then we put it into a sprinkle bottle.
Hmm.
And so we do food toppers with the exact same ingredients that are our bags. So if you love chicken gizzards, like you said, what's working really well for you, you can buy a leftovers chicken gizzard, bottle that's already a ground, powder you can sprinkle onto food and sort of use it as a food topper. So we
I
basically
love it.
mirror. So if we when we launch beef liver, we got a beef liver topper, lung,
Yeah.
all of those things, which is great because a lot of our raw feeders are trying to mix in organs. And so rather than sort of
Yeah.
breaking all those pieces, you can just get a topper and sprinkle that right on. So if you're trying to get spleen and other filter organs that you don't want to buy at your local grocery store because you don't know where it's
Yep.
coming from, it's a good way to sort of add things in on the sprinkle side. We also do dehydrated blood, which is always a weird thing to say. So we work with the farm to capture blood. We take that, then we dehydrate it, and then we grind it up, put it into sprinkle bottles. It's good iron content, good recharge. Um,
Hmm.
so a couple different options that you can sort of, use during mealtime if you're looking to sort of spice things up.
Yeah, that's super cool. My cats are a great example of animals who don't love a dehydrated liver, spleen, kidney. I think because for
Yeah.
the most part, it's coming in those kind of flat, like chips. And although they like to chew on something that is like maybe long, they don't like to try and chew and crunch through like a flake of something. And so I like the idea of the sprinkles because you're literally sprinkling it over the top. It makes me think of my husband. Whenever he gets ice cream, he has to get rainbow sprinkles. He just loves rainbow sprinkles. So I read sprinkles, and that was the first thing I thought of. And then I was like,
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't put this on my ice cream cone, but I would put it on my pup cup. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's a great way to eliminate waste.
We see on Instagram all the time as people doing yogurt bowls and things for their dogs and doing little ice creams, and will be a
Put a
topper
sprinkle
they
on
use
top.
all the time. So yeah,
I
every dog
love
deserves
that.
some
I'm going to
sprinkles.
order some, and I'm going to do it and tag you.
Yeah, please do. And we always love seeing how creative people. Somebody did like for Cinco de Mayo, they did like dog margaritas and they used it as like the salt. It was pretty cute. So it was fun.
Like on
There's a
the
lot of
rim of
creativity out
of
there.
the glass.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. Oh
exactly.
my gosh. I'm not that creative. I'm very slap this raw piece of meat into a bowl and
Yeah,
then take a video. But maybe I'll
yeah,
try. I'll try harder now.
yeah.
Oh gosh. So before we wrap it up, I would love for you to tell people how they can find you and your products and your services, and I'll link stuff in the show notes, but I find it helpful when people just say so that people don't always have to click on the captions.
Please visit us at farmhounds.com. Um,
Yeah.
we prefer customers work directly with us. It allows us to have better customer service and also help them, find the things that they need. So that's going to be the main go-to. We do have independent retailers all across the country because we do wholesale as well. So if you're a retailer listening, you can absolutely sell our products in your store. And then we also have a store locator on our website that will help you direct traffic and kind of show you like, oh, if I'm in this city, I can pick it up at that local place. Each store carries different products, and so that's something where they're not going to carry necessarily a full line. So if you want to shop everything, we recommend just going directly to our website.
I appreciate all the insight that you shared. I loved learning about the many different proteins that you guys offer. I love how you are eliminating waste and helping both local farmers so that they're not wasting anything. And then even within your own facility with the sprinkles, I think that it all just comes together so beautifully. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and educate my audience. And I hope I get to see you again soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Excited to keep chatting and we'll see what we do next.
All right, we'll connect sometime soon. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please remember that you, yes, you, are the driving force that helps keep small businesses and platforms like mine running. So if you liked what you heard, please like, share, and most importantly, rate this podcast. It's the only way we can reach more people and spread the word about natural health. None of the conditions discussed or recommendations given are meant to replace the advice of your health provider. So if you have concerns about yourself or your pets, please confer with a human or animal health practitioner. Have a super fantastic day, and I'll see you next week.